In this video, I'm going to go over the top 5 profitable cars, the cars with the highest return on investment on the entire Turo platform. Now, this list is based on data that is provided directly by Turo based on their national averages and the exact return on investment based on the value of the vehicle and what your cost is of having that car. And it is a fascinating list. So I'm going to reveal this list, but then we're going to go over something that, in my opinion, is a bit misleading about this list. And you may not want to take it for just face value. I think there are a few things that Turo isn't necessarily disclosing, which as host, we need to really pay attention to, because it could definitely get you into a situation where you are taking on way more financial liability than the actual potential of a profit margin. So let's dive in. All right, so the number 5 car on this list is a Ford EcoSport. Turo estimates that it has a return on investment of almost 172%. And the way that they come to this conclusion is that they estimate the value of the car to be about $15,000, and they estimate that your annual loan cost is going to be $3,352, and the average earnings is going to be just over $9,100 for the entire year. Then number 4 on the list is your Ford Fiesta with an annual return on investment of about 178%. I'm just going to round up a little bit to make this easier for us to understand. The estimated value on that car is about $11,500, meaning that's the price that you are purchasing or financing this vehicle for. And in fact, this data is based on financing the vehicle at a 10% down payment, 8% interest on the loan, which are of course very high numbers based on the car buying environment that we are in right now. Now, the Ford Fiesta has an annual loan cost of $2,545, and Turo estimates that your average earnings per year on a Ford Fiesta are just over $7,000. Number 3 on the list is a Ford Focus. The estimated value is about $11,000 on the car, and they estimate that the annualized return on investment is 180%. Now, the key thing that I want you guys to pay attention to as I read off this list is the annualized return on investment. They are giving it to us in terms of percentages, and we're going to break down the math to see what that actually means. Because yes, 180% sounds super impressive. Ask any investor out there, hey, if I give you 180% return on your investment, is that an investment you would jump on? Their answer would be absolutely yes, in the blink of an eye. But the thing is, we don't really get the true cost of this investment, and that's what we're going to break down because it can be a little bit misleading. Then the number 2 car on this list is a Dodge Grand Caravan, and that has an ROI of 181.9%. It has an estimated value, so you're going to get into this car for about $16,000. The annual loan cost is going to be just under $3,600, and your average earnings is going to be just over $10,100 for the year. And then finally, the number 1 most profitable car on the Turo platform. This is a national average, and this is of course vehicles that are in a budget range between $10,000 to $25,000, which is, I think, for most of the people who are on the Turo platform, at least 80% of hosts out there, that is typically what your buying power looks like. So the number 1 car on the list is a Chevy Cruze with an annualized return on investment of 195.8%. And that is mega impressive. Now, they are valuing the car at about $11,140. The annual loan cost is just under $2,500, and your average earnings for the year are about $7,300. So a super impressive list. And the one thing that caught my attention right away is that the top 5 cars are all American made, which I was a little bit surprised. I thought we would see a little bit more variety in there, but it is really interesting. Now, here's the thing. These numbers sound fantastic, right? You're seeing almost 200% return on investment on the top performing car, which sounds really impressive. And it makes you immediately think, hey, wow, that is amazing. These cars are super profitable. I can create a whole business out of this and have a fleet of cars, and I'm gonna make 200% on my investment. And I'm here to show you guys, the next part of this video is going to be really breaking that down to see, is that actually the return on investment? And you have to be very careful in actually doing the math to understand exactly how this works. So we are going to take their number one car on the list, which is the Chevrolet Cruze, right, at a 195.8% ROI, and we're going to break down the math. Now, I did some quick, post-it math before putting this video together, and basically, if you look at the annual loan cost, right, which is $2,468, you divide that by 12, that's going to give us our monthly car payment, which it turns out to be $205. Then they say the average earnings per year is $7,300. Again, if you divide that by 12, that tells us our average earning for the month is going to be $608. So we're going to take our total earnings for the month, 608, minus our car payment, which is 205, and that's going to roughly give us about $400 in margin. Now, the thing to remember is that that is just very top line margin, right? There are tons of other costs that you really need to factor in. For example, insurance. Everyone has to carry insurance when you list a car on the platform, no matter what. And that is insurance outside of Turo's insurance. And the one thing that Turo did not disclose in this data is if they are accounting for their cut of the revenue, which it doesn't seem like it. Don't quote me on it because they didn't transparently say. But as many of you might know, Turo does take a cut of your revenue, and it can range anywhere from 10% to upwards of 40%, depending on which host protection plan you're on. And if you want to learn more about the host protection plans, I got a full video on it right here, so you can check that out. So that's another thing, is you have your own insurance outside of the platform, which let's just say that's $50 a month. So we're going to take that $400, subtract 50 out of it. Now you're down to $350. And then there's, of course, parking, any sort of maintenance, cleaning costs that you can factor in as well. And let's just say that maybe that's around $50. Well, now your profits have really dwindled down to $300. And so there are a lot of these expenses that can come into play. And we're just being super conservative here with the numbers, but that can really diminish a lot of your profitability. And sort of my gripe with these numbers and in the way that in which they are displayed is that it really doesn't show a lot of transparency into some of the real cost of doing business when it comes to Turo, and it can be a little bit misleading. So at the end of the day, one of the things that you really have to think about for yourself is, okay, what is my time worth? Let's say I'm going to list a Chevrolet Cruze on the platform, and it's going to go out for 20 to 25 days out of the month, which means I'm spending my time cleaning these cars, maybe doing deliveries, meeting guests, and all that type of stuff. Is your time worth maybe a net revenue of $250 to $300 or so once you deduct all of those expenses? And that is ultimately up to you as the host to determine. For many people, it is the case to where it is worth it. A lot of people also think in terms of scale and volume, right? Maybe this is a game of thin margins, but you operate in quantity. So you end up having a fleet of 20, 30 cars where, yes, then if you are making $300 per car, then it could really be worth your while. But if this is your only car that you're doing and that's what the margin looks like, then it may not be worth your time. Now, finally, I think the biggest discrepancy in this information that's provided is not really disclosing the year of the car and how many miles it might have on it. So one of the things that I wanted to do is, I'm going to share my screen with you guys, is I wanted to look at, okay, if Turo is valuing the Chevrolet Cruze at about $11,000, well, what type of Cruze can you actually get for $11,000 in the market today? So I went on Edmunds.com and I wanted to do a quick search to see what I found, and it is absolutely shocking. Okay, so one of the main things that I did was I went into Edmunds.com and I set my budget for a Chevrolet Cruze. And I just set it to $11,000 to $12,000 because Turo had estimated the value of the Cruze at just a little over $11,100, right? And I wanted to see, well, what do you get in that price category? So if you begin at the top of the list, right? You can see here, they are a bit dated in terms of which year these cars were made. So you're seeing 2016s, 2015s, but the thing that has surprised me the most is the high mileage on these vehicles. So you're seeing cars that have over 62,000 miles, 100,000 miles, which is really insane to me. If you keep going down the list, and as the prices decrease and fluctuate a little bit, the one thing you will continue to see that they have in common is the very, very high mileage on these vehicles. Again, we continue to see them, well above 90,000 miles, above 100,000 miles, and that is kind of crazy in my opinion for the Turo platform. And you can just keep going and you will see that you continue to see that same consistency in the type of vehicle that's available and the mileage. And so my point being, why I really sort of point that out is because on Turo, you are going to see a lot of mileage utilization on your vehicles. Now, if you list a vehicle on the platform that is already super high in its miles, well, then the variable expense of unexpected maintenance, the probability of having that unexpected maintenance is going to be much higher, which means at the end of the day, you're going to have way more cost of doing business on a vehicle that has high mileage. Now, yes, it is true. Some of these cars are great quality. They will live forever and they will have minimum problems. But again, it is really introducing that variability into your business. And that's why I don't necessarily agree with the fact that a Chevy Cruze has almost a 200% return on investment, because when you factor everything in, it really eats away at your margins, right? And I actually suspect that you have maybe $100 to $200 profit per month on that vehicle after you factor in everything for the year, especially maintenance cost on that high mileage vehicle. So what I really want to emphasize in this video is Turo can absolutely be a great business if you find the right car that has great margins for your market, right? There's a lot of that variability. And while lists like this can be super compelling, what you want to make sure you do is don't take them for face value. You want to really truly break down the math, really understand what you are getting yourself into and what at the end of the day your net margin could look like. So after all of your expenses. Now, if you want to learn more on how exactly to conduct that market research to really truly figure out which car is going to perform best in your market, check out my website, powerhost.club. I have a full walkthrough on this. As a host who's been doing this for 8 years, I hope that my guidance is helpful to you on your Turo journey.